Sunday, 2 August 2026. 3 Asia-Pacific AI stories before your first coffee. The International Labor Organization published a study on 8 July estimating that roughly 80 million workers across ASEAN, about 22.9% of regional employment, hold occupations exposed to generative AI. Exposure varies sharply by economy. Singapore sits at 42.2%, tracking its white-collar occupational structure, while Thailand registers 20.6%. Some 11.7 million workers, or 3.3% of the ASEAN workforce, fall into the highest exposure category, and women are more than twice as likely as men to occupy those roles because they are concentrated in clerical, administrative, and professional positions. Why it matters? ASEAN governments are pouring capital and political energy into data center build-outs and power procurement, but not one member state has published a reskilling target sized against the ILO's exposure numbers. That gap leaves workforce adjustment to employers and individuals, which historically means the adjustment is slow, uneven, and regressive. Capital allocators backing AI infrastructure across the region should watch for a policy correction. Once labor ministries catch up, training mandates or levies could land on the same firms currently enjoying light touch regulation. The gender skew is the sharpest pressure point because clerical automation will hit female employment disproportionately and create political urgency faster than aggregate numbers alone. Builders deploying generative AI tools into ASEAN enterprise workflows should expect workforce transition requirements to start appearing in procurement terms within 12 to 18 months. So, Taipei Statistics Agency reported second quarter GDP growth of 12.92% year-on-year, the fastest April to June reading in 39 years, pushing first half expansion to 13.72%, which the agency called the strongest opening half in 50 years. The result beat the agency's own May forecast by more than 2 percentage points, with every major component running ahead of projection. The surprise is where the growth sat. Domestic demand contributed 7.00 percentage points against 5.93 from net exports, the first time in this AI-driven cycle that the domestic side led. Why it matters? The headline number confirms Taiwan's role as the primary hardware bottleneck economy for global AI build-out, but the composition shift is what operators and allocators should focus on. Private consumption grew 5.88%, fueled by record equity gains concentrated in semiconductor names. That makes the consumption leg of GDP directly exposed to the chip sector correction that hit in late July, meaning the second half could look materially different from the first. For capital allocators, the read-through is that Taiwan's macro story is no longer just an export proxy for NVIDIA orders. It now carries a domestic wealth effect feedback loop that amplifies both the upside and the downside of any shift in AI capex sentiment across the Pacific. Now, Washington's Department of Energy says it wants Japan's leading corporate labs, not just government institutes, inside the Genesis mission, a $1 billion joint science program announced on 4 June. The 5-year commitment splits funding evenly between the two governments and currently links 11 joint scientific teams across 12 U.S. national laboratories and 12 Japanese research institutions, with shared access to Fugaku and DOE supercomputing resources. Dario Gil, the DOE Undersecretary for Science, confirmed the corporate invitation in remarks to Nikkei Asia on 1 August. Why it matters? The data handling and sharing protocols are still under negotiation, and that single clause will determine whether listed Japanese firms such as NEC, Fujitsu, or Hitachi can actually participate without tripping export control or disclosure obligations. For capital allocators, the signal is that Washington is building a trusted compute and research corridor with Tokyo first, then potentially extending it to Seoul, Taipei, or New Delhi. Gil framed entry criteria around allies who share American views on scientific integrity, which effectively sets the template for any later invitations. Builders working on large-scale simulation, material science, or climate modeling should watch the data governance tools closely, because whatever framework Tokyo and Washington agree on will likely become the baseline for multilateral AI research access across the Indo-Pacific. That is your AIinAsia briefing for today. Stay sharp, build well,